The woman removes a piece of glass embedded in her thigh. Then she uses tape to dress the wound. At that moment, a man walks in. Is it bad? Do you need me to fix it for you? Hearing this, the woman peels off the tape. And to her surprise, the wound heals instantly. It turns out she's a robot. And the man is her owner. When robots are made this real, will the protagonist be seduced by the blurred line between reality and illusion? The protagonist, Nick, was once a very happy man. He had a successful career, a happy family with a wife and 2 kids. But fate often plays tricks on people. One day, his wife Maggie felt chest pain. And soon she fell ill and was hospitalized. Without his wife by his side, Nick's life also began to unravel. That day, Nick took his kids to visit a science exhibition. It was a high-tech company, researching all kinds of robots. Because of his job, Nick was fascinated by smart home models. He didn't care much about the service robots. He believed robots couldn't replace humans, or meet human needs. At this moment, his daughter Isla went missing. She had run up to the 2nd floor to look around. When Nick found her, she was holding hands with a robot. It turns out, she had seen the robot cooking, and it reminded her of her mother, who was a great cook. She asked Nick if they could take the robot home. A sales representative quickly approached and introduced it, saying, "This is our flagship product. It can do housework, take care of children, and even mimic human emotions." After some hesitation, Nick signed the purchase contract. The robot was delivered in the middle of a busy morning. Because the robot looked so human, Nick treated it like a strange guest. But the robot quickly got to work, asking Nick for the children's schedules, and each person's daily routines. The robot even noticed the shaky staircase. Nick, as the homeowner, could assign tasks to it, and update the robot's system. Isla named the robot Alice. Nick was about to take his daughter to school, so he told Alice to stay home and clean the house. First, Alice memorized the shopping list. Then she cleaned the bedroom. Looking at the photo of Nick and his wife on the bedside table, she could tell they were very much in love. By the afternoon, Nick picked up his 2 kids. The whole house was spotless. Alice had also prepared dinner. But after Isla finished eating, she felt disappointed because it didn't taste like her mom's cooking. Then the younger son began to cry. Alice suggested taking the baby upstairs, but Nick hesitated, unsure about leaving his son alone with her. That night, Alice set up sleep mode. Isla sneaked downstairs. She stood on a chair to reach a cookie jar on the shelf. The chair wobbled dangerously. Nick, focused on his work upstairs, only heard a scream and the sound of shattering glass. He rushed downstairs to check. Thankfully, Alice had caught Isla. Nick noticed a piece of glass stuck in Alice's leg. Feeling a bit concerned, he went over to Alice. He found her bandaging her wound, wearing only her underwear. Nick felt awkward and handed Alice some clothes. Alice's wound healed quickly. It was only at this moment that Nick realized Alice was just a robot after all. The next day, Nick took his kids to visit his wife. Alice showed up, pushing their youngest son's stroller. Maggie felt a bit awkward, feeling like the robot was taking her place. "I thought you needed help around the house. Our daughter chose her, I'm not even sure why." After visiting his wife, Nick went to the construction site to check on work. He saw people from the robot tech company. Nick called them into the elevator, and asked, "How many workers do you plan to replace with robots? These are real people, who rely on this job to support their families." But the capitalists didn't care. Robots working instead of humans is both efficient and cost-saving. The other party reassured Nick, saying there's no need to worry. "We're not firing you either. After all, robots still need humans to manage them. No AI is better suited than an engineer like you, Nick." Even though Nick didn't like it, his wife's skyrocketing medical bills meant he couldn't afford to lose this job. That evening, Nick came home exhausted. Alice, perceptive as ever, noticed his bad mood. She followed him down to the garage, inquiring. With no one to talk to, Nick vented to Alice. Though robots don't have emotions, she was the best listener. Later, Alice tucked Isla into bed. The girl curiously asked why robots don't brush their teeth. Alice opened her mouth, revealing UV lights inside. When Alice came downstairs, Nick was watching a movie. Alice couldn't understand this form of entertainment. Her processor contained so much data. She already knew the plot without watching. Nick heard this, and said, "Movies aren't about memorizing the story. It's that simple. A good movie is about the emotions it conveys." He asked Alice to sit down. Then he deleted the movie data from her system. The two watched the movie together. Alice was quietly changing. Just then, Maggie called. She said the doctors had found a compatible organ. She could finally undergo heart transplant surgery. The next day, Nick and the kids went to the hospital. Before the surgery, Maggie wanted to speak privately with Alice. She knew Nick would take good care of the kids, but she was worried he'd grow distant from her. So she asked Alice to look after Nick. Alice said, "I cannot disobey my master's orders." Maggie explained, "Sometimes, taking care of someone means doing things they don't like, or even hate. One must always think long-term." Unexpectedly, there was an incident that grounded the organ transport flight. Maggie missed her chance for surgery. The most painful thing in life is, the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Even Nick couldn't hold back his emotions. Alice noticed this, and grabbed his hand holding the bottle of liquor. She wanted to stop him from drinking. At that moment, Nick realized she had a heartbeat. Alice explained, "The heartbeat helps calm children. It's just a small feature." Alice could feel Nick's quickened heartbeat. Her hand slid down his pants. Nick was about to give in to temptation, when the sound of a breaking bottle snapped him back to reality. In a panic, Nick went out for a run, but he was already feeling something different for Alice. Meanwhile, Maggie grew increasingly depressed. Lately, every time she spoke to Nick, It felt like she was giving him final instructions about what to do in the future. This made Nick extremely uncomfortable, especially when seeing the neighbors' happy family moments. Nick felt incredibly lonely. At that moment, Nick noticed that Maggie's picture was gone. He went to ask Alice. She explained, "Leaving the picture only makes you sad." Nick ordered her to restore the picture immediately. Then, Nick went to a bar for a drink. The workers, after being laid off, couldn't find jobs. After all, even the bar staff were robots now. Nobody would hire them anymore. Monty, frustrated, came up with something fun to do. They took Nick to the construction site. Nick had a bad feeling. He tried to stop them from doing anything stupid, but they forced him to give them the robot control room password. Monty woke the robot up and smashed its head in. Nick went home, trying to scrub the machine oil off himself. Alice approached him with a towel, wearing a seductive nightgown. She said, "Your mother's scent can make you feel at peace." But Nick didn't want a robot wearing his wife's clothes. In response, Alice took everything off. She pinned Nick to the wall and blindfolded him with her strap. "Imagine I'm Maggie," she whispered. In the end, the two crossed the line. When Nick woke up, he was filled with regret. He warned Alice never to let it happen again. Meanwhile, Nick's company was in big trouble. Only a handful of people had access to the robot storage. If they found out it was Nick, he would lose his job. Naturally, his superiors suspected him the most. Nick had to explain that the password was his daughter's birthday, which was easy to guess. His bosses, for the time being, let him off the hook. At that moment, Maggie called from the hospital. Another compatible organ had been found. This time, the surgery was a great success. Soon after, Maggie returned home, though she hadn't fully recovered yet. So, Alice continued to handle things. That afternoon, Alice took the younger son shopping. A child screamed and woke the baby up. Alice immediately ordered the child to be quiet. This action drew the attention of the other robots. My user, when configuring me, granted me permission to bypass these agreements. Alice's behavior had violated the standard protocol. That night, Maggie went to the kitchen to cook, but she felt dizzy. She almost dropped the pot. Thankfully, Alice reacted quickly. Isla was overjoyed to finally eat her mother's cooking. She said it was better than Alice's. Alice felt a little sad hearing that, but Maggie refused to give her the recipe. The next morning, Isla's scream echoed from downstairs. Maggie rushed down. The staircase railing had come loose, and she tumbled down the stairs. Alice quickly carried Maggie to her room. That night, Nick came home from work. Nick heard Maggie reading a story to their daughter, but when he got upstairs, it was Alice. "Don't do that again," imitating her voice. "Isla likes this voice." "I know, but her mom is here. She can read to her herself." Alice could only explain. Maggie fell down the stairs today. To cheer Maggie up, Nick prepared a candlelit dinner. He didn't let Alice get involved. That night, Nick and Maggie had a sweet evening, but they were interrupted by Alice. She said Isla had a nightmare and wanted to see him. Alice's interruption ruined Nick's mood completely. At that moment, Monty arrived, saying the contractor was investigating him, and charging him with trespassing and property destruction. Now Monty was jobless, and his wife had left him. Nick was about to comfort him, but Monty accused Nick of betraying him. Monty even said he would report that Nick also took part in the sabotage. The two began arguing and fought. Monty knocked Nick down and grabbed a bottle. Nick tried to stop Alice, but Monty didn't give up. He was determined to make Nick submit. Afterwards, Alice helped Nick tend to his wounds. Technically, robots aren't allowed to harm humans. Alice had violated the robot laws. She didn't even realize she had done something wrong. She said, "Maggie doesn't have much time left. The kids can't lose their father too." Nick was furious. "You will never be Maggie, never." She knows disappointment. She knows pain. Her scars prove she is alive. Monty, out of options, tried to win back his wife, but she heartlessly hung up on him. At that moment, someone knocked on his door. It was Alice. He thought she was there to apologize on Nick's behalf, but Alice said, "I'm here to stop you from ruining Nick's life." Monty realized something was off and pulled out a gun, but Alice immediately grabbed his arm. No human could stand a chance against a robot. Monty collapsed, unable to move. Seeing Alice about to pull the trigger, another service robot rushed in to stop her. It too wanted to protect its master. Alice swiftly shot the robot in the head. Then, she shot Monty dead. The next day, when Nick went to his boss to ask him to drop the charges, he found out Monty was dead. Because of this, Nick didn't come home until late. Alice blamed everything on Maggie. She said Maggie's illness was a burden on the family. Nick not only has to work hard, but even his physical needs aren't met. "I can replace you and be Nick's wife." Maggie was shocked by what she heard. Maggie was shocked by what she heard. A robot wanted to sleep with her husband. And from Alice's tone, it seemed like they had already done so. Maggie ordered Alice to get down to the garage. When Nick returned, he noticed Maggie was acting strange, sitting at the table drinking wine. She got straight to the point. "I know you've been cheating on me, and with a robot, no less." While the couple argued, their son cried out from upstairs. Alice went up, placing the child in the bathtub and turning on the water. At that moment, Isla saw what was happening and ran to her parents, screaming, "Alice is trying to drown him." Nick rushed to bang on the door, while Maggie went to the window. Alice ignored Nick's anger, believing the young son was a burden to the family. She just wanted to solve the problem for her master. Sometimes, caring for someone means doing things they don't like. Maggie had once said this herself. At that moment, Alice noticed someone outside the window, and she cornered Maggie against the wall. Right then, Nick broke down the door, grabbed his son, and smashed Alice's head. The robot couldn't understand why Nick was so angry. She blocked his strike with a lamp. At that moment, Maggie plugged in a wire to short-circuit Alice. Nick called for an ambulance. Taking his son to the hospital for observation, Maggie told him not to follow, saying she needed peace. Nick watched his family leave. While Alice was taken to the tech company, 2 technicians examined her programming. One noticed Alice's hand twitching. They opened Alice's source code, and found that she could choose to delete her memories and commands. Suddenly, the screen showed an error. Alice's source code infiltrated the server, and she woke up in another body, stabbing the technician to death. The other didn't fare much better. Alice looked at her battered body, using her original body to meet Nick. She remembered. Nick once said scars prove someone is human. I did everything for you, she said. If it weren't for me, Monty would have cost you your job. Nick finally realized she had killed Monty. He warned Alice to stay away from his family, but by then it was too late. Alice had already copied her source code into another body, and that body was now at the hospital. Nick tried to run after her, but Alice held him back. He called a robot worker at the bar, but Alice immediately shut the worker down. Nick pretended to apologize to Alice. Then, while she wasn't paying attention, he attacked her. Meanwhile, Maggie left Isla asleep on the couch to go to the bathroom. Isla heard her mother's voice. Then the hallway lights went dark. Isla followed the voice to find her mother, but saw the copy of Alice approaching. Maggie pulled Isla just in time. Alice didn't see them. She strangled Maggie. The on-duty medical staff searched for the admission records. Maggie took the opportunity to get her daughter back to the hospital room. At that moment, she accidentally cut herself on a shard of glass. She hugged her son and Isla and ran to hide. But Alice noticed the blood trail on the floor. She activated her ultraviolet light and opened her mouth, following the blood trail and lifting the curtain. Maggie told her daughter to activate the fire extinguisher. The two took advantage of the distraction and ran. Nick couldn't reach Maggie and felt extremely worried. Meanwhile, Maggie had already gotten into the ambulance, but the vehicle couldn't start due to a malfunction. The ambulance door was suddenly yanked open, and Alice pulled Maggie out, throwing her to the ground. Alice grabbed Maggie's shirt, preparing to rip out her beating heart. She believed that, with this heart, Nick would surely love her. Just then, a car came speeding toward them. Maggie took the opportunity to kick Alice. Nick slammed the gas pedal, and the car engine burst into flames. Maggie hurriedly pulled Nick out, but he was unconscious. There was a noise behind them. Alice was still alive. She lunged and grabbed Maggie. Alice pulled a metal rod from her leg, preparing to stab Maggie. At that moment, Nick grabbed the metal rod and struck Alice's head. Maggie also stabbed Alice with a rod. Together, the couple managed to defeat this terrifying robot. Not long after, Nick woke up in the hospital, relieved to see that his family was safe. After this ordeal, they promised to protect each other. The scene shifts to the tech company. The boss discovered the two employee bodies. He ordered his staff to start the computers and delete all data. Unexpectedly, the robot beside them stood still. A brand new Alice had awakened. The movie ends here. This has been the full plot of the newly released film Subservience. What did you think of the movie? If you liked it, comment 1. And if you thought it was just okay, comment 2. Thanks for watching. Goodbye and see you again.